Hello, welcome to my show. My name is Kate Mackenzie, and today I'm talking to the wonderful Chris Lang. Chris Lang of the very famous show Unforgotten, and so many shows. He started off as a performer. He actually was drummer in the original version of the Housemartins, really great story. And then he also was in a performing troupe with Hugh Grant, which went into great success at the Edinburgh show and on television, and then wrote for many very famous comedians in the UK, before writing for shows like The Bill and Soldier Soldier and winning various awards on the way, including a Writers Guild Award, and then writing shows like The Glass with John Thorne, Sarah in Lancashire, until also now writing the world-renowned Unforgotten. He's also had many shows translated in France and now in Finland. So he's really in his peak, top of his game, and a wonderful person to talk about love, pleasure, joy, and his creativity in his life and how that works and how you do it, how you engage in it. So I really hope you enjoy this. I really did. I think it's an amazing thing to hear someone at the top of their game and how life works for them and how they keep themselves well. He not only just talks about that, he also talks about the plurality of life, the intersectionality of life, the diversity of life, and how good people can do bad things and bad people can do good things, and how we all have these different sides to us, and that sometimes in dramas people are portrayed as one-dimensional, but that's never the truth. And can we live with that inconsistency? Can we live with that lack of containment, that we don't know what's going to happen next, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but can we commit to our own lives, and can we be in the balance of our own lives as a work in progress? And can we have that humility? Can we have that compassion for ourselves and for others, while still holding boundaries, while still safeguarding ourselves and society? So it was a real privilege, it was a real honour to talk with Chris. And it makes my life feel really amazing that I have the privilege to talk to people who've grown and learned, formed and shaped like Chris has, and who are willing to share the journey. As Steve Jobs said, we don't know where we're going, we don't know where it's going to, till at the end we look back. So thank you, Chris, for looking back with me and sharing this with others, so that we may all pick up your tips and how we may grow. Thanks. Hello, Chris Lang. Thank you so much. Bless your darling heart in your busy life to spend some time with me, chatting about you and your life and career and your creativity. Thank you. So, Chris, great privilege, obviously, because you are just about, I'm sure you've got huge ambitions more, but you're just about the top of your career right now with...
It's all downhill from here on. I may have reached the pinnacle, but it's only going one way.
So, what's that like, Chris? In lockdown, Unforgotten reached like 7 million plus viewers, and it's in America. You're having Finland make shows, copies of your shows. France keep remaking your work, and you seem to be able to have your pick, like Sheila Hancock and Tom Courtenay, Nicola Walker, Sanjeev Bhaskar. You seem to have your pick of people, and you can commission. You've got your own TV company. What's that like?
Well, it's good, obviously. It often doesn't... It's an interesting question to ask, because you can forget sometimes what privileged position you've arrived at, because just by our nature as human beings, we adjust very quickly to whatever level of success or failure we're living at. And I certainly don't spend my days walking around going, oh my God, I'm doing so well. So yeah, the key is to occasionally take a minute, take a breath, take stock, and go, this was everything that you dreamt of 20 years ago, 25, 30 years ago, when you were trying to become a successful writer. You are now where you always hoped you would be, and appreciate it. So I do that, and I do look around, and I do sometimes pinch myself and go, wow, I'm sitting having coffee with Sir Tom Courtenay in the Ivy, or I'm at a read through with, quite a lot of national treasures, or I'm able to send my scripts out to whoever, or I'm at BAFTA, an award ceremony, sitting next to Alex Jennings, and he's nominated for my thing. You have to just really relish those moments, because it's very easy just to take them for granted.
So do you allow that? Do you allow that? Do you have a breath and a moment and feel that? I
try to make myself, because it doesn't really come naturally. I'm not really a sort of pat yourself on the back sort of person. I never have been. I never look at my stuff once it's gone out. I don't think I've ever watched anything that I've ever made more than when it broadcasts. I mean, obviously I've watched it a lot when I'm making it, but I don't think I've ever gone back and looked at something and gone, I am brilliant, aren't I? It seems very self-congratulatory and very indulgent, really. So I'm quite sort of Puritan in that sense.
And I suppose that keeps you open.
I hope.
You open.
Yeah.
When you get like pretty much 5-star reviews from all the media,
yeah,
is there still part of you that then is still looking for where could I improve, or do you go, oh yeah, 5-star reviews, everybody likes what I'm doing?
It's very nice to get 5-star reviews, but again, you'd just be astonished by how quickly you become accustomed to that, which is terrible and dangerous. And you find yourself being slightly irritated that the Times only gave you 4 stars, which is not natural or good or right, that you should get irritated only to get 4 stars. and you come to expect it as well. None of this is normal, but it's a function of being, I think it is a function of being human, because I do think we find our level. If I make my way through this world, through my life, and I always have done, operating at a certain level of contentment and happiness, and it's not hugely related to my external success.
Oh, that's amazing.
And so when I was not successful, which was for many years, or I wasn't, I was doing fine, but I wasn't, I was struggling in lots of ways professionally. I would say I don't think I was significantly less happy as a person than I am now. So I think you get these little bursts of happiness when you get nominated, or your show goes out and it gets 5-star reviews, and for an hour or two you go, oh man, that's really good. But of course real life then infiltrates that moment, and you've got to do the washing, and you've got to put the bins out, and then you're going off to see some friends, and then you've got your family over, and and this is the real stuff of life. And if you're unhappy in those parts of your life, then that sort of that informs every single waking moment of your day. But doing well or not doing well in my career, I much prefer that I'm doing well, of course, but if I weren't, I don't think it would profoundly affect my happiness.
That's such an incredibly guiding principle for anyone listening, because of course it can be assumed if we get to the goal, then we'll be happy to hear that kind of full picture.
It's really dangerous to think that, and I certainly don't think I've always felt that way. It is definitely something you learn, and I know it's a terrible cliche to talk about the journey being much more important than the goal, but I've learned it really profoundly as I've gone on my journey. And those goals that you get to, they're never what you think they are. They're never as fulfilling or as magnificent as you think they are. And people often say to me, you know, oh, are you frustrated or annoyed that you personally haven't won a BAFTA or an RTS or whatever it is? And I hope I'm not being dishonest when I say I genuinely think the prize was getting to do this job and to get it and getting my shows made. And the idea of winning an award or further garlanding, whether it be through reviews or whatever, is not really what it's about. Obviously, often reviews and awards reflect, you know, the fact that you've done something quite good. But it's much more important that you've done something quite good than you get a further bauble on top of that, whether it be a great critical response or awards. You know, that's the prize. Make a show. Someone give you all that money to make a show, and then put it out there, and people respond to it positively and engage with it. That's what I really love, and that really does make me happy. And social media is a great facilitator of that communication because you literally in real time, as your show's going out, you see what people are thinking and how they're reacting. And when you have a fairly explosive show like series 4 of Unforgotten, for instance, you know, you are just being totally engulfed by this very visceral reaction to a piece of art, and it's amazing. That really is amazing.
What was that like? Because I know you engage, for example, on Twitter. So what was that like as it was coming out each week, and people were emotional? And I mean, I read you cried about the ending of Unforgotten yourself, you know, and I mean, what was that like? Because people get so engaged. I did myself, you know. So I was a bit freaked out about you know, I don't want to spoil things for anyone, but I was a bit freaked out about, you know, a main character dying, for example. Yeah. And I wonder what's that like for you, because these are your babies, and this is your...
Yeah, they are. And I have you know, a lot of people were very upset, and some people were angry, and right. I thought they were really angry. Yeah. And why wouldn't they be? This was someone that they brought into their homes. Totally. This was a character they connected with for 6 years. They felt they knew this person. Well, they did know this person. They knew this character. Yeah. And the grief and the sense of loss of a character that you love is real. And I feel it often if a character dies or a series comes to an end that I really loved. I felt fairly bereft when Breaking Bad ended. Yeah. There are other shows where I felt similar sense of loss, because I like being with those people, and I connected with them emotionally, because the dramatist, the writer, had done their job. They reached through the screen and connected with me, and I understood this person, and I understood the journey they were going on, and I related to it. And I think a lot of people related to Cassie, and you know, they wanted her to prevail because her journey was similar to maybe theirs, and they wanted to know that it could be okay, even though you've been through this terrible vicissitudes, and you know, they wanted it to be okay, and then it wasn't. But that's life, you know. That's what I was trying to say. Life is random and cruel, and we have to learn how to cope with those things. So, but to connect with that emotional reaction in a very immediate way through Twitter was very it was very moving. It's a very unusual show, that show. I mean, lots of stuff I write is quite ephemeral. It's there for entertainment, and you know, that there's nothing wrong with that. That's what 99% of TV is about. Unforgotten, I don't know why, because maybe it's subject matter. Sometimes it connects with people on a really profound level. Series 2, I get letters all the time, talking about the subject matter and what it did for people. And I feel, I guess I probably feel more proud, if that's the right word, again, quite sort of self-congratulatory, but I do feel proud of what everyone who made that show, and the actors and the whole team, achieved in helping people deal with something incredibly painful. Because a lot of people who watched it, it was the first time they'd heard characters on television express what they were thinking. They'd been abused as kids themselves. And it gave a lot of people a really surprising, and this is just the ones who wrote to me, it gave them the impetus to speak to their partners. And on a number of occasions, and people wrote to me and told me this, it gave them the impetus to go to the police and report the crimes against them. Now, when a television show can do that and shift a life in such a way, that's really pretty extraordinary.
Wow.
So yeah, that's a very it's a very unique thing, I think, for me to be able to connect with the audience on that way, whether they're tweeting me or direct messaging me or asking if they can write to me through Twitter or whatever. It is a real privilege to be able to.
There's a lot of service and a lot of heart, and I know because it was very moving. I read about you were moved by Stewart Hall when he came out and admitted his guilt in 2012, and how you were taken to a place that he would have to, how he would talk to his wife or how he would look at his life, and how there's no certainty in life. Life is full of conundrums. And I loved it. You said good people can do bad things, and I suppose bad people can do good things, and it's this multiplicity. And just like you're saying, when you're writing a drama like that, how it touches all the, what I noticed about, if I'm honest, with Unforgotten, one of the things I absolutely adored is everybody looked like real people.
Yeah.
And the acting.
Well, I'd written a fair old amount of dramas with villains who they were serving plot mechanics rather than truth. In my earlier in my career, and I guess maybe 15, 20 years ago, I finally worked out on my journey of learning what it is to really write stuff that connects with people, that they had to be real people, and the plot twists and surprises had to serve the character rather than the other way around. And I'm really, if I had to distill what Unforgotten was, it would be that line, that good people can do bad things and bad people can do good things, because that duality is present in our lives every single hour of every day of the week.
It's the human condition. There is no certainty. There is no balance. We don't know in the next second what's going to happen. None of us know. And can we be with that? Can we be with and I loved it because you talk about diversity and you talk about women's roles and roles for people of different races and cultures and colors and different. And I know you've got 3 young people in your life, and young people often talk about diversity and intersectionality and pansexuality and all the different aspects of life. And I've
learned so much from them because it's very easy as you get older to not absorb new ideas and to think that your years afford you a degree of understanding, wisdom, knowledge that actually, well, they can afford you some of that, but what they can also do is see you, arrested in your growth, an absorption of new ideas, and having, well, I've got 5 young people in this house, 3 of my own and my 2 stepdaughters, and they are constantly introducing new thoughts and ideas to me, which is very, very precious, really. It's very valuable. And I've, in the last 2 or 3 years, obviously there have been some big cultural shifts, and I think I've been helped to understand them more sympathetically, more compassionately by having kids who are, tuned in to all of that. I was only discussing this literally this morning with my daughter, my stepdaughter, how you can't absorb new ideas unless you spend a lot of time thinking about them.
That's brilliant.
And you can't really work out how you feel about things unless you do lots of thinking and constantly examine the way you have historically thought and challenge it. Is that the right way to think? What does it say about you? What does it say about your view on X, Y, or Z? Is it good? So having someone who's provocative in your household in a constructive way is incredibly useful to a bloke who's about to be 60.
Congratulations and happy birthday, Chris. Absolutely amazing. And Chris, I've had the privilege of meeting your parents, and they're wonderful and creative beings. But were you encouraged to be creative when you were growing up?
Completely. And, you know,
How was that? What did they, how were they with you in that encouragement?
Well, my mum was, first of all, was an art teacher, and my mum and dad met at art school. So, you know, it was in their DNA, and it was in my mum's father's DNA as well. He was a musician, and she was, she was so delighted that Oscar became a musician, my son, because, you know, there was this continuous thread of music through
what kind of music?
4 generations.
What kind of?
He was a multi-instrumentalist, but in the end, he became a conductor of, there was a very famous show in the 40s and 50s called the Billy Cotton Band Show, which started on the radio. And then it transferred onto TV. And my grandfather was the conductor of the Billy Cotton Band. Wow. So, you know, he was so it ran in, there's this sort of thing about creativity that it has to be enabled. You have to enable it and allow it in order for it to flourish. And it was never, ever questioned or doubted in our house. And it's weird because it was quite unusual for someone like me in the 1970s. I went to a pretty conservative, old-fashioned grammar school in Surrey. I was the first person ever to apply to go to drama school. And I remember the careers master looked at me like I was mad when I said that's what I wanted to do. But my mum and dad never questioned it. And that was in 1976 or 7. And it's weird. I remember talking to a parent of my youngest son only 5-10 years ago. We were at a dinner somewhere. And they were very academic, the pair of them. And their daughter was bright and she was going to St. Paul's School. And I said, what do you think she'll want to do? She plays the cello. And I said, what do you think she want to do when she leaves school? Might she want to become a professional musician or something? And he looked at me again like I was mad. And he was an ophthalmologist and a consultant, very sort of, you know, bright and very, very academic. And he looked at me and said, a professional musician? I said, yeah, you know. Yeah. And he said, no, she absolutely would. No, we wouldn't ever encourage to do that. And I said, why not? Again, I was being provocative because it annoyed me. And he said, well, because that's not what we do. She's going to be a doctor or a lawyer or an academic or whatever. And I mean, I didn't push it. The notion that, you know, I think there was some sort of bafflement that could be a serious career. Of course, the creative industries contribute more to the UK's economy than banking does. It's worth, you know, about 100 billion sterling to the British economy. It's a massive, massive industry across TV, film, music, fashion, advertising. All of those creative impulses, you know, generate huge, huge, huge amounts of money. So it's a valid job, but lots of people don't really see it in that way. And it's also utterly, it's as essential as penicillin, you know, what we do.
Without that, where's our humanity? Where's our, it's culture defines us, really.
Completely. It's what makes us, you know, human. It's the exploration of the human condition in whatever form, whether it be a book or a play or a dance or a piece of music. It separates us from the animal world, I think. And it's key. So anyway, going back to your question, my mum and dad were brilliant in that. They exposed us to all sorts of cultural influences from a very early age. Theatre all the time. I think I first saw my first play at a national when I was like 9 years old and being utterly transfixed by it. But my mum, who you know recently died, we're going to scatter her ashes on the South Bank by the National Theatre, because it was probably her favourite place in the world in London. And so, you know, that's how it was woven into our DNA. And it's a precious gift.
And so you had that incredibly positive encouragement, and then you were in the Housemartins.
Well, I mean, I wasn't really. I was a tiny bit in a sort of very early incarnation of the Housemartins. It might say that on Wikipedia, but I don't know who wrote that. Yeah, I mean, I was in a band with Paul and Norman for a long time. And then Paul went up to Hull and formed an early version of the Housemartins, for which he needed a drummer, and asked me to come up to Hull. But I was starting my career as an actor at that point, and I said no thanks. But when he came down to London, and we did some demos together, which went on their very first early Housemartin cassette, and that's my claim to being in the Housemartins.
Wow. And then of course, you know, you came out of RADA, and you were in regional theatre with the little known at the time Hugh Grant, and created the Jockeys of Norfolk.
Yeah.
And again had a TV show, and then did more TV. And how was that? That was
fantastic. I loved that. Was my introduction to writing, really. It's the first time I ever wrote anything. Right. Me and Hugh, we both started in Nottingham Playhouse, doing 6 months rep, which was a bit like a 6-month prison sentence, because we were very creatively unsatisfied. We had nothing to do really. We were given one line in each play or whatever. We were mainly bringing furniture on and off the stage. And bored creatively, we decided to start writing a sketch show together. And it was incredibly exhilarating to find that you could write stuff that made people laugh. And it just got bigger and bigger until we were selling out at Edinburgh in a 500-seater, and lots of well-known comedians of the day were asking us to write for them. We wrote for Smith and Jones, Mel Smith and Griff Rhys-Jones, who were about as hot as it got at the time. Wrote briefly for Jonathan Ross, wrote for Jack D, Hayden Pace, and all these people. Well, I did anyway. Hugh had gone off to become a film star by that point. But yeah, it was a very stimulating and happy, creative time.
And you also did Telly. You were in lots of parts yourself.
Yeah, a few, not lots, I'd say. You know, as soon as I started to write in 1983, 4, I realized that's what I really wanted to do. So I'd only come out of RADA in early 83. And that was my first job. And literally within 2-3 months of leaving RADA, thinking I was going to be an actor all my life, I started this other career as a writer and realized, I like this. I did the other alongside it for maybe another 10 years, because acting's great fun, but I didn't gain anywhere. I didn't gain the same satisfaction I gained out of creating something rather than interpreting something.
So that performing side of you, do you miss that, or is it that all that creativity goes into the writing now?
Yeah, definitely. I don't miss it at all. No. I did a tiny cameo for more or less for a joke in series 2 or 3 of Unforgotten. We had a production meeting one day, and they said we're over budget, and we've got to cut this character, this character, this character. And I said, you can't cut that character. He's only got 3 lines and it's really important. They said, well, it's going to cost us a few £1,000. We can't do it. And I went, I'll do it. I'll do it for nothing. And they couldn't really refuse. So I did it.
And how was that?
I had acted for 20 years. I hadn't stood in front of a camera for 20 years. And my first scene was with Kevin McNally.
Oh my God.
And he's like quite a big cheese, and he was very gentle with me, but I didn't. When I did it, I remember thinking, Jesus, this is quite hard, and I'm not very good at it.
It's quite amazing. It's quite amazing acting, especially watching Unforgotten. The way people move their faces and they show emotion, and you realize real people in real life don't do that, but actors tell us what feelings feel like and emit tiny movements in their face.
Well, that's the secret. You see, the really fabulous ones do very, very little, but in order to do very little and convey what you need to do is an astonishingly difficult thing. We always liken it to watching someone like Nicola, for instance. It's like a duck with the legs are paddling furiously underwater where you can't see them, and then above water it's serene and calm, and it's doing everything it needs to do to push the scene forward, because the really brilliant ones make it look easy, and it's just so not. It's just incredibly difficult.
That's right. And I think the thing which you weave through your series is love. Like all the people have relationships and they have children, and they have children with issues that need to be looked at, and it's all mixed. And I think you talked about with this, with the police as well, that there's this diversity or these different parts where the police do so much and we're all so grateful. And then you've seen there's endemic racism or misogyny, and you, all your characters have all these different parts to them. And then there's, you know, Nicola Walker challenging other police people, you know, and that's her own profession, and that in a show, that's already challenging, isn't it? So
yeah, it's complex and multi-layered, and that's what you want from a show, really.
And yet so warm, even though you're talking about a murder and a dismembered body and a hidden piece of truth, and you know, the impact of shame on people and society, and what shame will do, like about hiding things. It's done with so much love and care. Like you took us slowly. It's not done to shock, even though it's shocking. Somehow the shock is unfolded the way
well, you know, you want to take people on a journey with those characters, and you want them to follow that journey, and you want them to engage with that person. You can't do that if the person is uncomplicatedly evil or a wrong. And going back to where we started, you know, good people could do bad things. We all do. So that's how you engage the audience and encourage them to come on this very difficult journey. And I'm not, I mean, you know, I did write one series where the central character was a psychopath, but most of them are just ordinary people who've, through a series of extraordinary circumstances, stepped over that line. And I think mostly we look at those people and think they're but for the grace of God. And I think that's really important, because it means people can relate to the characters, and although they've done a heinous thing, they can still understand them. And I think mostly people feel compassion and for the characters who've transgressed. I think they mostly feel compassion, and I'm really interested in that, because I think we live in a society that's, you know, very uncompassionate.
Where do you get that kind of compassion and that kind of moral compass of being able to hold both and these different parts? You know, where did your parents, I mean, obviously on one level you didn't grow up with that kind of binary, become a banker, doctor, accountant. You grew up with be yourself and go for your dream, be creative. You grew up with that kind of openness. Is that?
Well, very open and very liberal parents who introduced me to the ideas of, you know, tolerance and plurality and liberalness at a very young age. And looking back on it now, it's pretty extraordinary. You know, in the 60s, my mum and dad's best friends, before it was even legal, were a couple of gay guys who lived in Stockwell, and we would spend a lot of time with them, and sometimes they would babysit for me and my brother. And, you know, that sort of, and as slowly as we got older, we realized that actually it was quite difficult to be gay in the 60s and 70s. But just that as an indicator of the sort of people my mum and dad were and how they viewed the world. And they, you know, we grew up in leafy Surrey, but, you know, they were dyed-in-the-wool Labour voters, which I think tend to at that time anyway, tended to be far more tolerant. And you know, most of my friends' parents were Tories at a time when the Tories were absolutely, you know, the nasty party, and were quite bigoted and racist and sexist and homophobic and all these sorts of things. So we were, you know, we were encouraged to never be like that and to be tolerant. And, you know, that again, it just, at such a young age, it completely molds you. And then you just, that's the approach you take as you go through life, trying to understand people and trying to understand when things go wrong. It's, you know, it's hard, because when people do bad things, I mean, Series 5 really examines this idea. I'm fascinated by, you know, I love watching shows like 24 Hours in Police Custody, because you see these people who come in and they've often done dreadful, dreadful things. And then slowly, quite often, you peel back the layers of where their violence came from, where their hatred came from. And quite often it will just be the most awful story of abuse and neglect and lovelessness and hatred in their young lives. There's almost no one who ends up, transgressing and becoming violent and hateful. Almost no one is born. No one's born like that, but very few people have that as an innate quality anyway. It comes from damage.
Yeah.
And it's trying to understand that and trying to communicate that to the world, because I think we can be very binary. When people do something dreadful, we go, you're bad, you're evil, and you're unforgivable.
Yeah.
And I don't subscribe to that idea at all. I think, you have to try and answer that. That's not to say you don't punish people who've done terrible things, and you don't make society safe when they've done terrible things, because they have to be, the rest of society has to be protected from them if that is how they have turned out, and they are violent and dangerous. They have to go to prison, and we have to be protected. But you still have to try and understand, and you have to show compassion and forgiveness, because otherwise, where does it lead? It's, desperate. So I'm very interested in trying to communicate that idea to a quite a big audience now. I'm lucky that last show got 9.5, 10 million, and obviously plays around the world, and so you have this privilege to communicate ideas which hopefully, well, they're quite challenging ideas, and they're provocative. They will make people think, I hope, in a different way.
So there's kind of service in this job. There's kind of service of being able to kind of open up doorways and look at shadows